What is up, everybody? So I've finally gotten all of the new parts for my new computer. I got them all right here and right over here. So I figured I'd do a build video for those of you that might be interested in building your own computer. It is pretty expensive to build a really powerful rig, but I'd say I'd say it's really worth it if you want to customize it and do something yourself. Honestly, it's not that hard if you want to build your own machine. It's really like a really expensive Lego set. Pretty much everything only connects to one spot, so it's really hard to screw up. So I think if you're interested, you should just go for it. But yeah, so I'm going to go through all the parts that I got, and I also have a camera up there that'll be looking top down for when I'm actually building the computer. So I guess let's get started. Honestly, I don't know how this video is going to work because the GoPro won't connect to my phone, so I'm at a little bit of a loss there. I can't see the preview or how it's set up. So first thing is the case that I got. This is a Cooler Master S600 Silencio. It's got soundproofing in it, and that'll really help me when I do my videos and recording and stuff. On the top, it's got a little hub with an SD card reader, 2 USB ports, audio, and obviously the power and reset buttons, and the glass case so you can see inside. So that's pretty cool. I like really streamlined cases, good angles, nothing too fancy on the front, just a black box. As for the internals, first thing I started out with is the Z390A Asus Prime motherboard, and this is for 300 series. So it takes, as far as the processor goes, it has to be a 300 series processor and motherboard. So that's what I got with this here. I have an Asus Z170A in my old computer, and I really enjoyed it. So I went ahead and went with Asus again. Processor, Intel i9 unlocked. So if you're building your own machine and you get an unlocked processor, it does not come with the heat core or fan. You have to buy that separately. Thermal paste, don't forget to get that. Goes with the processor. And as for the fan that I got, I went with Cooler Master because it goes with the case. It's an RGB fan and heatsink direct contact right onto the processor, so good for cooling. RAM, I went with Corsair Vengeance RGB, 32 gigs. It is 4 sticks of 8 gigabytes each. So last computer only had 16, so 32 is going to be a nice upgrade, especially for video processing and rendering. Graphics card, RTX 2070. I got the gigabyte one. It's actually a little cheaper. Does the same thing as some of the more higher branded ones like EVGA. A lot more expensive for the same exact thing. So I went with the gigabyte one. It was about 200 bucks less. Power supply, Corsair RM850, lots of power, and it's probably overkill for what I needed, but it was on sale. So I got this for the same price as a 600 watt power supply. Storage devices. I went with the Samsung 970 EVO NVMe M2, and this one is 250 gigs, and this will be my boot drive. All of my Adobe applications will go on here. Other games like League of Legends and Call of Duty, PUBG, stuff like that will go on this. And my main storage is a Samsung 860 EVO, 2 terabyte SSD. And the last thing that I'll be putting in there is a wireless network adapter. This does have Bluetooth 5.0 with it, so I will be able to use my Apple AirPods with that, and that's pretty much why I got this. So when I'm streaming, I don't have to wear the big headset all the time. I can just wear my AirPods if I want to. So that is it for the actual computer components. So like I said, I have a camera up there that'll be looking down into the computer as I work on it. So I guess let's get started. As far as tools go, I have a precision toolkit that I borrowed from my fiance, actually. It's nice and pink, but hey, it'll work. So, all right, so what we'll need to do here is get the case up. And the first thing that's going to need to go in is the power supply. There's actually shaking the camera. There's actually a bay on the bottom of this, which will hide the power supply, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the case off here. And sorry for the shaky camera. I'm using a GoPro and I don't have a mount for it, unfortunately. All right, so inside the case is some stuff. This is a cover for up here for quieter running. And if you don't have maximum cooling, you can actually use this, which is just a vent. It'll let a little more noise through, but it's not really terrible. And then I'll actually go ahead and take off the other side of the case too, so I can get in there and do some cable management around the back side. All right, so you can see back here is like all the cables. This runs up here to the hub where the USB and the SD card reader is, and then you got some other stuff down here that will plug into the motherboard and provide power there. I should probably undo all that just so I can get all that prepared. So I've got some zip ties, screws for the motherboard, and some other harnesses in here. Not really sure what those are. I haven't seen those before. And yeah, this is everything else that goes with the motherboard itself. So that actually looks like it should belong there, and that's okay. Let's see. All right, so this stuff, we'll leave this stuff down here for now. We'll run all that after the motherboard actually goes in. And on the back of the case, you can see the power supply will go right here in this hole. Don't need that. And I'm going to go ahead and take off this bottom vent here now because it's just a little in the way. All right, so first things first, we're going to have to do the power supply. This. If I can find out how to open this thing, there it is. All right. Okay, so here is the power supply itself. Pretty big fan. This fan is actually significantly larger than the 550 watt I have in my old computer. So that's really nice. Got some zip ties for cords, and then also with the power supply, you get pretty much everything you need. All of the 4, 6, 8 pin connectors all come with the power supply, as well as the power cord that provides power, so that's good. I'm just checking this thing out because I want to see what it's all about. Okay. All right, so after I get the power supply in, I'll actually get the case up on the desk or the table in front of me. But until then, I just want to get this in. Very simple to put the power supply in. It just goes in with 4 screws in the back side of it to hold it in, which I will get out of here. All right, so now we can get into the top-down view after I rearrange that stuff around. So I have the motherboard power connection coming from here. This will go to the GPU when that gets installed. And this CPU power I ran up through the top of the case, so it'll plug in just about right around this area here. So I just want to stick that somewhere so it's out of the way a little bit, and then we can go ahead and try to get back to the motherboard. And from here we can go ahead and take this, and it goes just about like that. So that should be seated there. And that will do it. All right, so for these, we can go ahead and start putting in the motherboard screws. So then if you're ever doing this, when you're putting in the screws for the motherboard, tighten them until they're snug. If you do it until they're super tight, it'll crack the motherboard and you will be out $100 and some and probably pretty angry. And I managed to drop a screw down here that I can't get out, so needle nose pliers always help a little bit. So let's see if I can drop this in the correct location. Nope. There we go. Got her that time. All right, so for this motherboard, 9 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's an ATX motherboard. You also have micro ATXs, which have different screw placement. For this one, full-size ATX. So 9 screws in all. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to install the M2 NVMe drive, which goes right here. And the reason I want to do that next is because it might be a little difficult to get to once I get the processor in and the fan and the heatsink on top. So right here, 970 EVO M2 NVMe is 2280. So you have 3 screws here for 2242, 2260, and 2200. And those are the sizes as in the length of them. All right, so here is my boot drive, 250 gigabytes right here in this little tiny thing. And the reason that these NVMEs are so much better is because they plug directly into the motherboard, so you don't get any bottlenecking with speeds through a SATA cable. So pretty much this computer, when it's done, will go from cold start to 100% operational in about 7 seconds. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pop this back out real quick and set it aside. Put this little screw in here that will boost it up so it'll keep it nice and level and it doesn't have to be like bent. Okay, so the M2 is going back in. I'm going to try to be very careful with this kind of stuff because they're very, very easy to break. And then on top of that goes one of these little screws. Which I have successfully dropped. And there is the M2 drive now installed. So that'll make life easier. If we would have had to wait to do that, processor would have been in the way and it would have been not a fun time. So now I guess we can go ahead and move on to the processor, which we'll do that. And this gets removed. It's a little plastic processor shield. Now, with the processor, this is incredibly important. There are very small pins on the processor where the processor sits, and if you bend even one of them, the processor is done. So what you'll do is you'll just drop it on top very, very carefully and make sure it seats correctly. And you can always tell which way the processor goes in, and I'll show you in a second. So right here, i9 9900K, really cool box actually. The box is pretty cool. All right, so processor, gonna go ahead and get that in now. All right, so you'll notice here on this processor, there is a little arrow here, and that indicates where the processor goes in and fits. correctly. All right, so processor is in. Go ahead and put this down. And that is the processor installation. So the processor is in. Next thing we have to move on to is going to be installing the fan. And that is this big guy. Because the Intel 9900K does not come with its own fan and heatsink, so I had to get my own. And this will be the heatsink that makes direct contact with the processor, and it lights up all kinds of pretty cool colors. Okay, so next thing we have to tackle, or rather I have to tackle, is put the CPU fan on. So it's got a few different parts, and depending on the motherboard that you have, there's a couple different ways that it can be done. So I am going to go ahead and figure out which one of these instructions is the right one, and then go ahead and show you guys putting together the fan and everything. Okay, so first thing that I got is this little bracket here for this particular motherboard will go right onto the heatsink down here, and this is going to allow it to connect with the holes in the motherboard for where the fan mounts. Okay, so that's on. The brackets are on there, and then it will sit just like this once I get the bolts on the bottom of it. So now next step is these pieces, which go on the back of the motherboard, and this will come up through the motherboard, allowing me to secure the fan to the motherboard itself. Okay, so putting this little contraption together, this is what's the bracket that goes on the back of the motherboard. So you have these little screws here that you put into the slot, and once you have it in the slot, this small clip here lines up with one of these lines here, and on the second line here is the actual size of the processor that I have. The socket type is an 1151, so in the instructions it actually tells you, and then when you flip it over you'll see these, and it will go onto the back of the motherboard after I move this stuff out of the way so I don't knock everything on the floor. And now the bracket is in the slot. We got the 4 screws sitting out through there. And then you have these caps here that then go on these to keep it secured in place. So I'll just do these finger tight at first. And then we have a neat little tool that will help snug them up. But I just do this so it doesn't fall out of the back while I'm trying to work on it from the front. All right, so bracket is in place. Then we have this, which is a little hex tool, and it will sit on top. And you just use a screwdriver to tighten them up, and it's just the same as earlier. We don't want to make them too tight because it'll crack the motherboard if you do. So then our next step is to actually apply the thermal paste. And if you don't have thermal paste for your processor, you better go get some. So I have this here is Arctic Silver 5 thermal paste. Pretty good stuff, very good reviews on Newegg. Should keep the processor all good. So for the thermal paste, we just put it right on top of the processor. And once you have done that, you can go ahead and take the processor or the heatsink, and it goes down on top
of the thermal paste. Okay, so graphics card time. So it's actually quite a big card. You can see here, Gigabyte RTX 2070. So with this, I need to take out these according to where it's going to plug into the machine itself. So it looks like, actually it looks like I was mistaken. It should be actually going to do it up top where I initially had said. So it'll be these two that come out here. All right, so let's move this out of the way. So then the graphics card should... Okay, so now the graphics card should slide nicely right down into these spots. And the graphics card just locked in as I pushed it down. So that is in and good. And then got to throw this screw back in here to secure the card to the chassis of the case. And now graphics card does not move. So that is good. That is where we want to be. All right, so Corsair Vengeance RGB, 4 sticks of 8 gigabytes for a total of 32. All right, so RAM only goes in one way. So once you get it, that's all there is really to it. And what you want to do before you put your own RAM in is open up all these little clips on the back. So there's clips on this side here, and these are not clips. And once you seat the RAM correctly and push down on it, that clip will close. So I'm gonna have to take the fan and the CPU back off and boost it up a little bit using these booster screws. So it just so happens and turns out that I'm an idiot, okay? And I was too excited to just get this together that I wasn't even looking at like how this goes in. And after I put the RAM in, I'm looking at this and I'm like, this doesn't look right. It's because this is supposed to be vertical, not horizontal. But it's not too big of a deal. Just unscrew it, flip it around, and it should be good to go. Let me actually install this how it was meant to go in. Now doesn't that look just so much better? Okay. Fan is on there. Or I'm sorry, the heat sink. And then from here, I can go ahead and put the fan back on. Which still isn't quite fitting with the RAM there, so the fan might have to go onto the other side. So switch it around real quick. And pop the fan back on. So fan's on the other side. A little unfortunate because the fan is RGB and does light up, but not too mad about it. I think I'm actually gonna go ahead and flip it around so the wires aren't really exposed. Be better cable management. So go ahead and throw it around. and clip it on that way. And the CPU now has power. CPU fan and lights are both plugged in. So next I'm going to go ahead and install my wireless network card. And these are some really big goofy antennas. But yeah, this is a very simple thing, and somebody else that sent us some wireless card drivers with a machine that doesn't have a CD drive, which I'm sure I could put one in if I wanted to, but we'll see. I might have to transfer the one from my old machine to this one so I can install some drivers. All right, so here is the wireless network card. It's got a little heatsink on it there. Doesn't get too hot. And this is going to go also in PCIe, and it will go into this one here. So it looks like I will have to take off this one. So then this slides right in there and down into the PCIe. And last but not least is going to be the hard drive. All right, so after checking out some very helpful instructions, I got these little doodads here, and these actually push right into these holes here. And you can mount the SSD either here on the back, or there actually is a spot on the front as well, but I think I want them hidden, so I'm gonna put them around the back here. I do actually have another 100 or 250 gigabyte SSD that I might throw in here for some other reasons if I ever find one, but it's just an extra that I have sitting around. All right, so now that those are in, you take the SSD and you have to take these little guys, screw them into the back of the SSD. And once that is all set up, I will take my SATA connector and plug that in. And then it sticks right into these holes here and just pushes down and seats in there nice and snug. And then for this, I will need to run the SATA out through here, and it will plug in just behind the graphics card on the other side. And now for the fun part. All of these. All of this needs to go in, and then from there, we should be ready to go. Okay, so the good thing about this with the Intel motherboard is it actually comes with this little guy here. And with this thing, it just makes it a lot easier to plug all these little connectors in. Because then you can plug them all into this, and then this goes straight into the motherboard. And start pulling this stuff through. So this is going to be HD audio. Okay, so everything is plugged in now, except for some stuff back here. These are extra fan slots for if you wanted to add more chassis fans. But for this, don't need any more. So I'm going to quickly clean this stuff up back here, zip tie it together just so it's not literally everywhere. And then I think it's time to try and fire this thing up. Okay, so here's the new computer. I got it set up next to my old one because all my cables are routed and pretty much there for cable management, so I can't move them. So let's go ahead and flip the switch. Okay, that's promising. RGB on the motherboard is on. And anything else we have? Some other RGB stuff back there in the chipset. Alright, so I'm honestly not sure which monitor is which here, so I'm just going to pick one. And I don't know which one that is, but anyways, go ahead and plug in. Alright, so Asus. So over here, computer is booting up, and we have new CPU installed. Please enter the setup to configure your system. F1. Oh, I didn't plug the keyboard in. Okay, keyboard's plugged in. F1 to enter setup. Get this microphone out of the way. All right, so everything looks good right now. You can see on the screen, I'll move the camera. So we have the CPU fan that's running good, 750 RPMs. Chassis fan 1 and chassis fan 2 are also running good, just around 800 RPMs. DRAM status over here. We have all 4 that are registering. Anything else? CPU motherboard temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. Overclocking. We could overclock, but I'm not going to do that because the i9 comes with hyper-threading capabilities and turbo boost. It's basically the processor overclocks itself when it thinks it needs it, so that is just fine. And CPU temperature is looking good, 26 degrees Celsius. All right, so a couple days ago on the Windows website, I made a USB stick of Windows 10, and I'm going to go ahead and pop that in now. All right, so let's go ahead and restart and see if we can pick up that USB stick that I put in. All right, so there we go. Automatically picked up the USB boot stick, and we're going to go ahead and install Windows 10. Now, what I did here was I made the copy of Windows 10 off of the Windows website. Since I had a pre-existing copy of Windows 10, I can use my old activation key to activate Windows 10 on the new computer. So from here, this is going to take a little while, and once this is done, we'll be back. All right, so new computer is up and running. Windows is installed. So now I'm going to work on installing drivers and anything else that has to do with the chipset for Asus. All of that I need to get done before I can really get into the computer. I also have to download the NVIDIA control panel for the RTX 2070. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, so the build is complete. Windows 10 is installed. I have a lot of work to do transferring all the data from my old computer and all of the applications over. I'm pretty much doing a clean install. I'm not porting anything over by any other means. I'm just transferring data files that I had to this one. Everything else is going to be a clean install. So yeah, this computer, 32 gigabytes of RAM, the Intel i9 9900K processor. One of my colleagues actually wanted this box when I was done with it, but I think it's really cool, so I think I'm going to keep it. And RTX 2070 graphics card in there, and I've already played around with it a little bit. It's really cool. As far as everything else goes, the build went pretty well. It was still a learning experience for me just because there's a couple things in here that I've never done before. I've never actually installed a external heatsink and fan for a CPU, so that was actually a first for me. It was fun to figure that out. I hope this video might have taught you something, or maybe if you're interested in building your own computer, maybe this will give you the push to do it. It is really fun. It took me about 2.5, 3 hours in all to actually get the computer together, up and running. So as far as right now goes, when I had it booted up, no problems. So that's good. So guys, if you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up down below. They really do help the video's popularity. And if you haven't done so yet, you can tap the subscribe button on your way out. If you hit the little bell icon next to the sub button, you will get notified whenever I upload new content. So guys, that's it. I think I will see you guys on the next video. I hope you enjoyed the build. Take it easy, everybody.